It's a nice latte. I'll give it that. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing something a little bit differently. I normally talk about books on this channel, and today we are going to dip our toes into the world of movies. We had a super rainy weekend here a couple weekends ago, and my partner and I decided, aka I forced him, to do a movie marathon with me. For no particular reason, I chose Nancy Meyers as our genre of films, or our discography of films that we were going to watch. She happens to have been the writer and director for one of my favorite rom-coms ever, called The Holiday, with Kate Winslet, Cameron Diaz, Jude Law, that's right, and Jack Black are our main love interest cast. Anyway, it's a super fun film. I haven't seen it in a while, but it's like up there in my top 10, maybe even top 5 rom-coms. And so I was like, why not watch some of Nancy Meyers' other works? She has a ton of extremely popular films, including the Lindsay Lohan Parent Trap, which is a cult classic at this point. It seemed like a very fun lineup of movies to try to watch some of her most popular films. So I wanted to dig into them, tell you what I thought about them. I'm not going to do a full plot breakdown. A lot of these movies are popular enough that I assume if you are here, you probably have seen them already, or as soon as I mention the name, it's probably popular enough you've either seen it and or you know the plot breakdown and cast of characters. So I really just kind of want to talk about things that I liked about the story and the characters, same like the way that I would talk about books, as well as just like what I thought overall of her discography as a whole bundle, if you will, of just like some of the ways that she wrote, some of the story elements that she leaned on heavily. Yeah, and some of the like just the way that she wrote characters. She's definitely the type of person who writes very similar relationships. Like, she defaults to very specific relationship dynamics that she likes to play with throughout her movies. Not that you can necessarily say that this character is that character in another film, but like the role they fill is very similar film by film. So without further ado, the first movie I'm going to jump into is Father of the Bride, which has a part 2 and a part 3, which we did not watch. We just stuck to part 1, and honestly, I will probably only watch part 1. This was written by Nancy Meyers and her then husband, Charles Shire. It centers on the Banks family, whose daughter has recently returned from a study abroad, maybe like her final semester of school, or just graduated. Don't really know why. She's been in Italy, but she's been there for like a year at this point. And surprise, surprise, she met somebody and she's getting married. It's okay, she met an American, she's not moving to Italy, but she's engaged and getting married. And George Banks, our father, who is played by Steve Martin, doesn't know how he feels about this. And by doesn't know how he feels about this, he's very unhappy.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Dad, I met a man in Rome, and he's wonderful and brilliant, and we're getting married.
Mom, what's he doing?
George, what is it?
Well, this is ridiculous. You're too young to get married.
Too young? Dad, I'm 22. If I'm not mistaken, that's a year older than Mom was when you guys got married.
That is absolutely not true.
Oh, no, you're absolutely wrong.
This is his little girl, Annie. Despite the fact she is 22 during the story of the movie, he looks at her and sees his like 5-year-old little girl with pigtails and a dress, like a little frilly princess dress on and stuff. George, I think, is meant to be portrayed as this very sympathetic father figure. I found his characterization more of an overbearing but well-meaning father who takes his role as the family's provider extremely personally, despite the fact that they are a dual income household and his wife owns her own company. He owns his own shoe factory, of all things. I don't really know what his wife does. She is a lesser part of the film, but she's there. Anyway, George is extremely resistant to any sort of change, particularly changes that would impact his nuclear family of him, his wife, Annie, and their son, Maddie. And so his reaction to Annie's engagement is less than ideal, we'll say. And he immediately is like trying to find faults with her fiance, Brian, and Brian's family, and just is a grump of all grumps during this like initial period of engagement and wedding planning. He just cannot force himself to be happy for the family or to be nice to be around even. I did have to say I got a little bit of a chuckle out of Annie's fiance being named Brian McKenzie, and he is a IT consultant or something. It's not spelled McKinsey the way that McKinsey Consultants is spelled, but I feel like maybe I'm reading into it, but I feel like it was kind of this subtle nod to like McKinsey Consultants. No one really knows what they do, but it's like a bougie job. Anyway, like I was saying, George and his overbearing nature is in full force when he first meets Brian and then meets the in-laws. And during that initial period of wedding planning, he nitpicks everyone and everything and almost has a heart attack when he learns how much money all of this is going to be. But instead of having a heart attack or lashing out at his family, he decides he's going to get away, and that ends up him escaping to their local supermarket, where he kind of has this mental breakdown on the workers there over the amount of hot dog buns sold in a package versus the amount of hot dogs sold in a package. The math isn't mathing in this scene if you pay close attention, but it is kind of funny, and I think it's probably one of the most popular clips of the movie. It is pretty humorous.
Excuse me, sir, what are you doing?
I'll tell you what I'm doing. I want to buy 8 hot dogs and 8 hot dog buns to go with them. But no one sells 8 hot dog buns. They only sell 12 hot dog buns. So I end up paying for 4 buns I don't need. So I am removing the superfluous buns.
I'm sorry, sir, but you're gonna have to pay for all 12 buns. They're not marked individually.
Yeah. You want to know why? Because some big shot over at the Wiener Company got together with some big shot over at the Bun Company and decided to rip off the American public. Because they think the American public is a bunch of trusting nitwits who'll pay for things they don't need rather than make us stink. Well, they're not ripping off this nitwit anymore because I'm not paying for one more thing I don't need. George Banks is saying no.
Who's George Banks?
Me!
Somewhat predictably, I thought the big conflict of the movie is that Annie and Brian have this big falling out over a misunderstood wedding present he gives to her. He mentions a situation which happened when Annie's parents first met Brian's parents. Annie, of course, didn't know about it, and so she accuses Brian of lying. Blah, 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 blah. Emotions get heated, and they're like, oh, we're calling off the wedding. George has to step in and get his redemption arc as being the good dad to reconcile the young couple. And we get a couple weird scenes of just like George having this realization that Annie is very much like him and Brian is very much like his wife Nina, and so therefore they must be a perfect fit. Why didn't he see it before? And he is like not excited about the wedding still, but he's more on board at this point, and ends up saving the wedding, which is ridiculously gaudy and hectic and extremely performative. George ends up basically running around with like a chicken with his head cut off during the whole wedding and doesn't see Annie except for like glimpses of her throughout the reception primarily. And it's meant to serve this idea of George, who I haven't stated this before, but like George is also narrating a lot of this film, and so we're seeing things happen, but we're also getting George's perspective a lot of the time. And basically, while he's running around the wedding reception, we're getting his voiceover narration, kind of coming to terms with the fact that his daughter now has a separate life from him, and that she has her own husband, and she's going to have her own family, and she's not living in their household anymore, and he has to be okay with that. We get this little heartfelt scene at the end where Annie and Brian have gone off. They're at the airport to catch their plane for their honeymoon, but she does remember to call and say goodbye to her dad, to be all like sweet and cute, and a little bit of moment of like, hey, even though, you know, kids move on and move out, they still love their parents, kind of a thing. And then we close the movie with Nina and George dancing in their now very messy living room, because the wedding was at their house. The reception was at their house. Overall, I think I would give this movie probably like a 3 out of 5 stars. As someone who has like negative interest in marriage and in weddings, all of the traditionalism and the transactionalism of the whole affair felt extremely shallow and very melodramatic at points in times. There are also some aspects of the film that I feel did not age well whatsoever, like a lot of just the classism and stereotyping of minorities and foreigners. There's a lot of conversation about how expensive things are and comparing different families' social status to each other, and, you know, expectations from society, and a lot of like keeping up with the Joneses kind of language. And then we get things like, of course, the only Hispanic character happens to also be a maid in a rich white person's household, and any sort of foreigner, if you will, that gets portrayed is like very over the top. Their accents are like so strong that nobody can understand them. Are they even speaking English? They don't understand anything. They're just dumb a little bit, which was a little distasteful. I know it's meant to come across as very humorous, but it felt overblown to me and very like, I don't know if this hits in 2026 anymore the way it did in 1991. The soundtrack, though, I will give the movie this, the soundtrack slapped. Movie number 2, we have the 1999 Lindsay Lohan Parent Trap, which this movie is still top notch. I remember that I saw like the very original version of the Parent Trap movie, or like an older version of it, first. And I knew of the Lindsay Lohan version, and I had seen clips of it, but I don't think I had ever watched the movie until probably sometime in my teen years, my adolescence, maybe even not till my late adolescence. I think this was probably only the second time that I've even seen this movie. I don't have like all of these childhood memories associated with it, but I do think it's a good film. It does establish a common theme that we'll see in all of Meyers movies, which is everybody lives on either the wealthy West Coast or the wealthy East Coast, specifically like LA areas or New York City areas. I'm just guessing that Meyers loves California and maybe doesn't think about telling stories about working class people in any other area of the country or of the world. Like, I guess stick to what you know best, and the Beverly Hills or the Hamptons is what she knows best. Okay. It's not bad, it just tends to make some elements of her movies very unrelatable because of the wealth class that we're dealing with. It just creates a different set of problems than, you know, someone who actually works to pay their bills. Regardless, her version of the Parent Trap is very quintessential. Annie and Hallie are the names of the twins. Annie is the one who has lived with their British mother. Hallie has lived with their American father. And Annie and the British butler, Martin, have an iconic relationship with each other. And the poker game after Hanny and Allie meet for the first time at summer camp had me absolutely cracking up. Like, these girls just think they are the coolest thing on God's green earth, and it is hilarious to me as someone who, you know, at one point was an 11-year-old girl. Like, it brings us back some memories. They just think they're such cool cats, and I love them for that. For anyone who's been living under a rock, The Parent Trap is the story that follows two 11-year-old identical twins who end up getting separated at birth when their parents split. The mom goes back to London with Annie. The dad moves off to Napa Valley with Hallie. Mom, Elizabeth James, becomes this really famous wedding designer. Dad, Nick Parker, owns a vineyard and produces a ton of wine. The girls somehow end up at this summer camp at the same time, end up interacting. They get in trouble and end up in this isolation cabin and stumble upon the truth that they are not just sisters but twins because of a photo that they have of their respective missing parent. And when they put them together, they're like, oh my gosh, it's my half. And so they like realize, right, that they're related to each other. And they have this brilliant plan that they're going to switch places so that each girl can meet the other parent and spend some time together. And then, because ultimately the parents will like kind of figure out they're not who they say they are, it's going to force their parents having a reunion. I did have to appreciate the like level of ingenuity that 11-year-olds put into this plan. I think particularly Annie, who struck me as maybe the twin who was like a little bit smarter, if you will, and Hallie was like the more personality twin. It's hilarious to watch all of like the classic 2010s beauty transformation scenes, right, in which Hallie has to cut Annie's hair and pierce her ears so that the girls look basically indistinguishable, as well as just like all the montages of them teaching each other about their lives and their houses. It is kind of interesting to see like the level of detail that they've thought this out, of where each room is in the house, how you address everybody, what their schedule is. Like, it is portrayed pretty well that these girls have thought out how to actually assume each other's identity in a pretty reasonable way. After that, I'm not going to give a play-by-play of the film. Like I said, it's probably familiar to most people. It is super adorable. I'll show some clips of my favorite scenes. I think part of what makes this movie magnificent is the cast of side characters, particularly Martin and Chessie. After all of their wild escapades in the San Francisco hotel where Annie and Hallie have managed to get their parents to reunite, we get another like wonderful sequence of pranks and witty banter when Nick takes the girls and his socialite fiance Meredith Blake out on a camping trip. I just absolutely love how Elizabeth kind of like weasels her way out of this and gets Meredith to take her place. It is chef's kiss. Like, the woman's been around a time or two.
Okay, all set? Have fun, everyone.
Liz, what are you doing?
Well, I really think that you and Meredith need some time alone before the big day.
Mom, come on. That's not the plan.
Oh, honestly, you'll have much more fun without me.
Wait. If you're not going, I certainly don't have to go. I mean, trust me, I'm not a big nature girl.
But this is your chance to really get to know the girls. I mean, after all, starting next week, they're half yours.
Unsurprisingly, this camping trip does not go very well. Annie and Hallie play pranks endlessly on Meredith to the point where she gives Nick an ultimatum. It's either me or the girls. And Nick is like, well, I'm choosing my daughters, of course. And so they're gone. Meredith's done. Bye-bye. And we get our obligatory happy ending in which the entire Parker James family reunites in London and they live happily ever after. Great movie. Definitely a cute film to watch and while away a rainy afternoon. Coffee break. It is a ridiculously hot, humid, disgusting day outside. We're getting this interspersion of really bad thunderstorm, back to super hot and humid, and then thunderstorm again. So it's a wild ride, and I am sitting inside with a blanket on and iced coffee because you know, I like comfort and coziness along with coffee that will not make me absolutely burn up. Anyway, the third movie, and I'm kind of doing this in chronological order. I didn't watch every single movie in Meyers' discography because she just has a lot, and it was already hard enough to find all of the ones I wanted to see because she's not readily available on most mainline streaming services. So I kind of like bounced around, but I tried to keep my review in somewhat chronological order. So we did 1991, we did 1998, we're now at 2003 with the movie called Something's Gotta Give. This is another Meyers and Diane Keaton collab. They did a ton of movies together. I guess they really liked each other. Diane Keaton plays our main character because now we get the feature of an older couple in this, and Diane Keaton plays Erica Berry, and her primary love interest is played by Jack Nicholson. His name is Harry Sanborn. It's another one of Meyers' works which starts with a voiceover narration throughout the intro. There are some of her films where she then uses that to carry the story along throughout the entirety of the film. This one, if I remember correctly, it's just at the beginning to like set the scene and kind of introduce some of the characters, but from then on out we are like seeing everything third person, if you will, like we're watching the things happening versus being in anybody's head, which was much more interesting to follow on. I think Father of the Bride was a little frustrating because of how much you were in George's head all the time and how much of an unlikable character he was, and everybody else was just, you know, a side plot to him, and you were just kind of seeing scenes without context except what George was giving you, and it was hard to make your own conclusions from what you were seeing because George was just like interrupting all the time. So I liked the fact that some of these other films, while we're getting that initial voiceover single character perspective, which typically also happens to be a man, I'll say more about that later. Anyway, that only happens at the beginning, and then we get to like have our own opinions as viewers on the story. The plot for Something's Gotta Give feels very much straight out of an Ellen Hildebrand novel. If you've ever read her works, it's like very classic beach read kind of stuff with a lot of family drama. Again, Meyers fully displays her obsession with age gap relationships and her very confusing ideas and relationship with feminism. We've got a lot of wealthy East Coasters in this film instead of LAers, Las Vegasers, whatever they're called, Californians. We have Harry Sanborn, like I said, who's this rich businessman. He only dates younger women exclusively, like it's a point of pride for him. At the moment, he is seeing Marin Klein, who is the daughter of our famous playwright Erica Berry. Their worlds collide at Erica's Hampton Beach House, during which we get to see like Erica's very depressing vision of her future as an older single woman, and hear Zoe, who is her sister's passionate diatribe on spinsterhood.
Come on, this is really fascinating what's going on at this table.
Zoe teaches women's studies at Columbia.
Okay, so this is gonna hurt.
No, look, let's take you and Erica, for example. Zoe. Harry, you've been around the block a few times, am I right? What are you, around 60? 63. Oh, fantastic. Never married, which, as we know, if you were a woman, would be a curse. You'd be an old maid, a spinster, blah, blah, blah. So instead of pitying you, they write articles about you. Celebrate your never marrying. You're elusive and ungettable, a real catch. Then, there's my gorgeous sister here.
No, wait,
Look,
what?
Listen, no, this is interesting.
Listen.
Look at her. She is so accomplished. The most successful female playwright since who? Lillian Hellman? She's over 50, divorced, and she sits in night after night after night because the available guys her age want somebody, forgive me for saying this, honey, but they want somebody that looks like Marin. So, the whole over 50 dating scene is geared towards men leaving older women out. And as a result, the women become more and more productive, and therefore, more and more interesting. which in turn makes them even less desirable because, as we all know, men, especially older men, are threatened and deathly afraid of productive and interesting women. It is just so clear. Single older women as a demographic are about as fucked a group as can ever exist. Oh.
I initially liked this scene at dinner where Zoe's kind of like not so subtly pointing out the hypocrisy of which society views older single men versus older single women and their value and their moral worth, I guess, to society. It is a little on the nose, and by little on the nose, I mean it's just like, it's very on the nose. There's no subtlety about any of this. It feels very like Meyers thought that maybe this was just, she had to add this scene, but she didn't believe in the scene because Zoe is not a prominent character. She expresses this viewpoint and then we kind of move on, and even in the viewpoint she expresses, it's very clear that this movie is going to be about Erica's relationships with men and her ultimately like falling in love and being with a man. It's not necessarily meant to go in the face of the societal idea that older single women are worthless. It was kind of a funny scene, but the message of it fell flat because it wasn't supported by the rest of the story. Harry has a heart attack when he and Mirren are trying to get it on, and that introduces us to the hospital and Erica's secondary love interest, Dr. Julian Mercer, played by a very young Keanu Reeves. We have this forced proximity scenario, which leads us into the section of the film which is all about Erica and Harry falling in love. Harry kind of like realizing that he's essentially limited his options, if you will, by only dating younger women. And hey, older women are actually cool and like have established careers and passions and hobbies and things that are interesting and lives that they've lived, and actually I have a lot in common with them because we're at a more similar stage in life. And so he's going through this whole arc of like self-exploration and falling in love with Erica. Erica is not necessarily having the same arc, but she's kind of, her arc is more like, oh, I misjudged this man. Like, maybe I'm too quick to judge and too cynical towards men, too closed off to forming romantic relationships in my life. And she has to like start opening herself up to that and opening herself to the opportunity to love again. Julian factors in a little bit of this, of he's trying to pursue Erica and goes on a couple of dates with her, but it's very clear that Erica and Harry are going to be the couple, at least at this point. We do get one of the weirdest sex scenes I have ever seen in a movie. Like, honestly, who thought turtlenecks were a kink? I didn't know that before this film, but they were. I don't think Diane Keaton like sells it for me, but you know, good on you if you find that arousing. I do have to say though, some of Erica and Harry's relationship moments were absolutely adorable. I loved like when they were just messaging each other from different rooms on their computers, or when they're making pancakes in their pajamas late at night, or laughing at each other's poor eyesight. Like, there's a lot of moments where, you know, they're trying to read something and they both have their glasses and they're like struggling to find them and like put them on and doing the whole like old people I can't see, and so they move the screen forward and back kind of a deal. It's just funny. It's like those moments of bonding of like you've both grown old, and it's like nice. I imagine this being this way as someone who's like not as old as they are in this movie, but like having a partner who I want to grow old with. I like to think of these moments as it's just like shared experience, right? And that does have its own way of bonding of like, oh, I have this thing, you have that thing too? Cool, right? It's just sweet. All good things, though, must come to an end when Harry ends up being okay and being able to go back to the city. He and Erica kind of halt their budding romance because she has this moment where she sees him with a younger woman and assumes that he's gone right back to his like philandering, I only date younger women way, and has totally cast Erica aside. Honestly, at this point, I just lost complete interest in this movie. The plot felt like it just rambled on and on and on. Erica got super annoying as a character. She's meant to be writing her next great play and ends up taking this situation with Harry as her inspiration and writing a whole play based off of their relationship. Every scene with her writing this is her also just sobbing because she's so sad. She loved Harry and she lost that. And it was infuriating. I was like, girl, shut up. Shut up. It was the most annoying wail ever. And I just wanted to fast forward it. There's an attempt at a rekindling of her relationship with Julian. We get a little bit more with her daughter, Mirren, whom at this point you've almost forgotten exists. She pops back up. She ends up getting married to a guy somewhat around her age and ends up pregnant by the end of the film. All during this time that Harry's experienced a few more heart attacks, which he learns are actually stress attacks or like panic anxiety attacks. The doctor ends up telling him, hey dude, I don't want to see you in the ER anymore. You need to like figure this out. And so he goes away for 6 months to like chillax. Erica's play goes super swimmingly. She gets a lot of accolades for it. We find out that Harry spent his time off actually like going around to all the past women that he had relationships with and trying to like figure out what went wrong in those relationships and kind of find some closure with those. He reconnects with Erica back in Paris because they had promised each other in a year or something like that. They were both going to meet up in Paris for her birthday. Yeah, it was whatever. They got a happy ending. She was technically with Julian, but then gives up Julian to go back to Harry because she realized that she was still in love with him, blah, blah, blah. I stopped watching, honestly. This movie could have been an hour shorter, and I still probably would have only rated it 1 star. It's probably worth noting, because this did just like come up in the Wikipedia article on this, that Something's Gotta Give was Meyers' first film after her own divorce, and so I think this might have been her attempt to face her own demons as an older single woman in a very male-dominated industry. One would wish that she wrote a more compelling and complex exploration of said themes, but it is what it is. We are now fast-forwarding our timeline to 2009 with the movie called It's Complicated. We have another star-studded cast, another fairly good soundtrack. We have our main character, Jane, who's a successful bakery owner in, can you guess? California. Yeah, that's right. Specifically, Santa Barbara. She is played by Meryl Streep, who, yeah, iconic. We all love her. How can you not? I know absolutely nothing about her as a person, but like, you have to admit, she's a dang good actress. So we have Jane, and then we have her husband, Jake, who is played by Alec Baldwin. They have been divorced for about 10 years after Jake cheated on her, ended up marrying his affair partner named Agnes, and they have a 5-year-old son who I think was named Pedro. Honestly, Agnes and Pedro don't factor a ton into the story, so like, irrelevant. Doesn't really matter if you know their names. Just know that Jake has another family, essentially. Jane is this very stereotypical Meyers female protagonist who just can't seem to get her life together without the presence of a man. It is extremely frustrating. Meyers apparently has this inability to write an independent, confident woman, and it is very frustrating as a viewer to have someone who's like constantly questioning their self-worth, who constantly can't set boundaries. Again, it's very first world problems of these uber wealthy people. Like, I guess because they don't have any issues of like putting food on the table, what issues are you left to resort to? It's all the relationship drama at that point, you know? So you gotta make these people have something wrong with them. And I guess that something wrong is we can't say no, or we can't accept a no. While attending their son's college graduation in New York City, Jane and Jake end up getting super wasted together, and lo and behold, that ends up to them being in bed together. So ensues the It's Complicated storyline of the movie, in which Jane can't say no and Jake cannot respect her boundaries, and so they end up having an affair together. And Jane's all like, oh, I'm cheating with my ex-husband on his current wife. She's like very clearly not interested in actually getting back together with Jake and having him, you know, divorce Agnes and return to her, but she is in this place of like reestablishing that she is interesting, I guess. Like, men find her sexually attractive is kind of how it's played, and that she can have a relationship. I guess, like, I don't know, it's weird because Jane and Jake don't ever talk. They do as it progresses, of like, they reminisce on their marriage and on their kids' childhood. They never really talk about why anything fell apart. We don't totally understand why Jake, you know, cheated on Jane. He is very self-obsessed and remains very self-obsessed throughout the entirety of the film. He just wants what he wants now. And Jane is just in this space of what I think is probably a very common occurrence amongst like divorced couples, is particularly when, you know, it happened because someone cheated on you, is like trying to validate to yourself that you actually are worth somebody else's time and that you can be loved again. So I don't want to say it was a like bad characterization or anything. It was just frustrating that it landed in a place where she had to have a man to feel good about herself again. Honestly, Jane would be more annoying if it wasn't Meryl Streep playing her. Jake, just regardless, I thought he was just insufferable. The only redeeming parts of the film, I thought, were John Krasinski, who played the fiance of their oldest daughter. He cracked me up. He had a lot of great scenes. And then Jane's other love interest, Adam, who is her architect and who is played by Steve Martin. They also had some very adorable scenes together. There's this hilarious scene where Adam and Jane first meet, and Adam has also been like recently-ish divorced within the past 2 to 5 years, and he's like holds a lot of anger and resentment about it, so he's listening to an audiobook about like getting over it. When he picks up Jane, thinks that he has stopped it, and then it ends up playing again, so she hears it, and it's like super awkward and hilarious. They smoke pot together at one point, also extremely endearing. They make some chocolate croissants and have this cute little romantic moment, and then Harley's just absolutely hilarious. He ends up finding out about Jake and Jane accidentally and doesn't know what to say about it, and so he gets super awkward, and he has this scene where he's like drinks way too much wine at dinner. He finds Jake and Jane smoking pot together in his bathroom at his engagement party, and it's just like, what are you guys doing? I can't believe this is happening. Also, can I smoke pot with you? Like, it's just hilarious. Like, I think John Krasinski has his moments where he's just like, he plays some really good, funny characters, and I think him as the comedic relief went over really well in this film. Long story short, all of their kids and Adam find out about Jane and Jake's like brief affair. Jake assumes that the affair was meant for him to get back with Jane officially, like he's not happy with Agnes and his life, and so he wants to move back, and Jane is like, absolutely not. Finally grows a backbone and is like, nope, not interested, get out. Gay for the girls moment, but then she does end up at the end kind of like, we are led to believe as the viewers that she and Adam are going to like officially get back together and be a thing. It was a fun movie, like definitely better than Something's Gotta Give. I'd probably rate it maybe 2.5 stars. I'm not dying to get back to it. It was fine. It had its moments. There were some good character moments. I think, again, it's just a lot of Meyers characters are just hard to relate to. Like, I often find myself attaching more to a side character than I do to any of the main characters, and so I'm just like, I'm not gonna go watch a film again because I don't like the people it's about. I can't relate to them. I don't find it interesting. I think they're written poorly sometimes, or written very stereotypically sometimes. the growth that they go on, the personal growth journey that they go on, doesn't always land in the place where I'm like, oh, yeah, like, I guess you could do that, but maybe you could have done something more interesting, maybe a little bit different. It's complicated. Second to last film that I watched is The Intern. I have seen The Intern before. It is a 2015 movie starring Anne Hathaway and Robert De Niro. There are a few other actors in this movie that are fairly well known. I just don't remember any of their names off the top of my head. At this point in watching Meyers' discography, this is when I realized a couple things, which is, one, all of her movies follow a very similar formula, and Nancy Meyers is definitely not a feminist at this point. Like, she had some moments where it felt like she was paying homage to that. She's not a feminist. So The Intern stars Robert De Niro. He plays this 70-year-old widower who becomes a senior intern at this fashion e-commerce company that Anne Hathaway's character, Jules Austin, is the CEO of and the founder of. The movie came out in this like heyday of Silicon Valley tech startups, like very tech bro-y, pro-capitalism, pro-venture capitalist, Mark Zuckerberg wannabes, like all of the excessive open office concepts of the tech space, like very, very much a product of its time and a celebration of its time, if you will. We have our typical Meyers elements of a male-centric narrative, the setting of wealthy East Coasters, because we're in New York, if I remember correctly, and an age gap relationship, though this time it is not romantic. I'll give it that. There are some very poor taste jokes in it, though. Paige, who is the daughter of Jules, has some weird moments with one of her schoolmates and calling her bipolar, and I was just like, this is distasteful. And we have Meyers again demonstrating that she just has absolutely no idea how to write an independent, well-spoken, confident, strong female character at all. Jules is portrayed as extremely overworked. She's guilt-ridden by her success. She's very emotional, and she has an inability to make any decision without a man's input, and yet proceeds to always take responsibility for any poor outcomes of those decisions that men have made for her in her life. And so we get the situation where she's become massively successful overnight. She feels guilt-ridden that her husband is a stay-at-home dad because he was at a point where like his career was starting to take off, but they couldn't both do it all at once for whatever reason, and so he had to be a stay-at-home dad, and now she like owes it to the family to provide for them, but also she never has time. Like, she's constantly working, and so she's on this hunt to find a CEO so that she can give more time to her family. She doesn't want to do it, but she feels like she owes it to her family. And then we find halfway through the film that her husband is also cheating on her. Jules immediately thinks that that is her fault. She's mad at her husband for making this decision, but she also feels like maybe she's partially to blame because of the fact that she became wildly successful and no longer had time for her family, no longer had time for her husband, and her husband had to make all of these sacrifices to be a stay-at-home dad. I have a lot of issues with some of how that's portrayed. While running around the city in her absolutely flawless makeup and her high-heeled shoes, Jules is constantly questioning if she like deserves her success and what she must owe to others because of it. Ben's only response, who is Robert De Niro's character, if I didn't say that already, his only response are these pithy one-liners that I would expect to hear from anyone who has ever picked up one of those like girl boss books or like has remotely been around pop culture of the 2010s with the tech bro-y like girl power movement. There were some nice moments to see. Jules at one point gets uncomfortable with Ben because he's too observant and she doesn't like people who ask questions, and so she tries to transfer him, ends up immediately regretting her decision, and we get this like very adult conversation in a coffee shop between her and Ben where she's like apologizing and explaining why she did what she did and asking him to be like, can you please come back and work for me? I really appreciate you, blah, blah, blah. Like, it was a very nice adult conversation to see. But then we get other moments, like Jules has this weird feminist rant at a bar after we've had this really funny, like, heist scene where she accidentally writes this email about her mom, who she has a really bad relationship with. She tries to send it to her husband, ends up sending it to her mom, and oh no, Ben has to save the day with his little group of, like, younger men that he's kind of formed this, like, pod with. I don't know what you call them. Bro code is a word that I'm thinking, but, like, it's the group, it's the boys club. And they all have to go, like, pull off this little heist to break into her mom's house and find the computer and delete the email, blah, blah, blah. They end up being successful, and so Jules takes them out for drinks, and she goes on this really weird rant of men these days. Editing faith here. I tried so many different ways to not get this copyright blocked, but here we are. Imagine we are in a bar, Anne Hathaway's character is talking to these three men, and she goes on the spiel of, boys, what can I say? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you boys. Nobody calls men men anymore. Have you noticed? Women went from girls to women. Men went from men to boys. This is a problem in the big picture. Do you know what I mean? Here's my theory about this. We all grew up during the take your daughter to work day thing, right? So we were always told we could be anything, do anything. And I think guys got maybe not left behind, but not quite as nurtured. I mean, like, we were the generation of, you go girl. And I wonder sometimes how guys fit in, you know? They still seem to be trying to figure it out. They're still dressing like little boys. They're still playing video games. How in one generation have men gone from guys like Jack Nicholson and Harrison Ford to take Ben here, a dying breed, you know? Look and learn, boys, because if you ask me, this is what cool is. It's just weird. Like, the film kind of plays with this idea, with this juxtaposition of the generations, and Robert De Niro being this very, like, classic James Bond kind of character. He's like always wearing suits to the office. He always carries a handkerchief. He's got a briefcase. He's very put together, very well spoken, very well educated, as opposed to the younger men of Jules' generation who are just like always wearing graphic t-shirts and kind of slobby and not shaving every day and, you know, can't afford their apartments and so on and so forth. It's one of those situations where the way that it's framed, I think, worked in the 2010s, but doesn't fly as well in the 2020s now, where it's like, okay, you can't gloss over a lot of the systemic issues which lead to the way that young people live now versus the way that our parents did at our ages. I think the setting of the movie probably doesn't age as well. Like, it just glamorizes tech startup culture, and I'm like, that's just not the world we live in anymore. Capitalism sucks. All of these tech startup peoples, you know, the Elon Musks of the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, they're all terrible, evil people who've done really awful things and have absolutely nothing good to contribute to the world, at this point at least, in their lives, and just continue to exploit others and make money off of, you know, trampling everybody else in their that they possibly can. So it just sucks. As a standalone film, yeah, The Intern's cute and it's fun. After watching it in the context of Meyers' other films, it just feels a little trite and uninteresting, honestly. I'd give this one probably another, I don't know, 3.5 stars. Okay, we are now on to the final film that I watched during my movie marathon. This is all the way in 2017. It was written by Meyers, or produced by Meyers. I think it was produced by Nancy Meyers, but it was written and directed in conjunction with her oldest daughter, Hallie Meyers Shire. I think it's kind of interesting that her daughter's named Hallie, and that was, you know, the name of one of the twins in The Parent Trap. I don't know if there's any connection to that. I just thought it was interesting. We have Reese Witherspoon is our big star of the movie. She's playing a 40-year-old single mother named Alice, who's recently moved with her 2 daughters out to LA of all places. Her father is recently deceased. He was a big filmmaker during his time. She looks up to him a lot, I guess, maybe. It's hard to tell. She is the one, so we get her as our beginning narrator, which is nice, alternative to a man. This is definitely the only film that felt like it was maybe more from a female perspective than anything. And probably, I imagine, it's because it was written by Hallie versus by Nancy. We get this intro where Alice talks a ton about her father, but it sounds like her mom split from him very early on in their relationship, and her mom features in the film, and like they seem to have a pretty good relationship, and so you kind of get an impression that Alice grew up with her mom a lot more, but she talks about her dad as like more of her inspiration in life or something. It's weird. I don't really understand why her dad factors at all into this story, except for the fact that Alice ends up with these 3 young aspiring filmmakers living with her over this like summer-fall period. It's really hard. It's LA, so there's no seasons, and the girls are in school, and so I think it's maybe fallish time period. And they're, trying to get their pilot made, and I think maybe that's why it's relevant that her dad is a filmmaker. There were a lot of pieces of this story and like side quests that just didn't make sense with the whole. My partner described it as like a lot of Meyers movies have this feel of trying to be very meta, of like the story that's being written in the film is also the story of the film itself, if that makes sense. And so this happened in Something's Gotta Give, where we have our playwright writing a play about her relationship, which is also the storyline of the movie. And in Home Again, we kind of get this similar thing of there's a play being written about these few weeks of all these characters living together, while we're also watching the movie about all of them living together. So like I said, we have another movie with a narrated intro. We have this rich white California family. We have another display of a woman who just cannot seem to set boundaries to save her life, and a whole host of men who wouldn't even respect them if she did manage to do so. And we have another age gap romance between older woman, younger man, which seems to be the favorite variation of age gap romances for Meyers. Honestly, this film felt fairly low budget despite the tax bracket that we see these characters live in. Like, there's not a ton of lavish sets. We don't really get to see any classic LA places. There's a scene with our trio of filmmakers, which is like the second scene where we see them all in, where they're pitching their pilot, and I swear, I did not edit this or change the music, but it feels like it's a corporate commercial.
My boys, you made it. Yes.
Hey, you told us we were serious about this. It was LA or bust. So here we are.
Listen, so sorry I had to keep pushing this meeting. You know, it's the end of the summer. The Jewish holiday this time of year is just insane.
No worries at all.
All right, good stuff. So here we go. Okay. Harry Dorsey, Teddy Dorsey, George Appleton, director, writer, star of Mad Youth, the best short. You know what? No, the best film I saw at South by.
The romance in this movie is also super awkward. The first night that Alice meets Harry and his 2 friends, it's like very clear that they're going to get together. They don't end up sleeping together the first night, but there's a will they, won't they, especially when the 3 end up moving into Alice's guest home. Harry's all like, we'll just be friends, okay? We'll be cool, we'll be friends. And then almost immediately, like, I don't know, the same day, just a few hours later, we get this really awkward scene in the kitchen where he's like helping her clean up, and then notices a loose cabinet door, and so he fixes it, and then he looks at her and is like, anything else I can do for you? Wink, wink. And you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so over the top. Like, nobody talks like this in real life. This is the kind of flirting where you're just like, it's so overt that it's so cheesy, and it only works when you really like the other person, but it's so cringe as someone who's just like looking in on that relationship. It's also odd because, again, kind of similar to Something's Gotta Give, this relationship is very much positioned as the means by which Alice is going to like move on from her previous relationship. She's finally going to ask for her divorce. She's going to get her interior design business started. Like, she's going to move on with her life, and she's going to realize that she deserves more. And she's going to do that by jumping into another relationship. Maybe it's just because I don't have my own experience of being super invested in one relationship and then the other person being the one to end it and being heartbroken because of it. And I don't have that period afterward of like moving on from that I can't relate to these characters. I don't know. It's just really frustrating to me that you have these women who are positioned as basically successful in every other area of their life except romantic relationships, and because they're not successful there, it just completely depletes their confidence, and they literally can't do anything until they can prove to themselves that they can be in a relationship with someone else. It's particularly hard when a lot of these relationships they jump into have so many red flags. Like, Harry and Alice are not a good match. It is very clear that they are never going to fully end up together, so it's just like, why did you write this story then? I don't understand. But also because, like, as a viewer, you're torn between, you're kind of encouraged to root for them, and at the same time you're kind of told to realize that Harry isn't good for Alice and she needs to move on. Alice obviously doesn't know the word NO, and so she gets walked on by her potential clients, her mom, her ex, like everybody in her life all the time. The only time that we get to see her stand up for herself is when she's stupid drunk and immediately like regrets her decision to say what's what to this client that was really mean to her and took advantage of her. Harry is sickeningly melodramatic and like immediately codependent on Alice. All the characters really felt pretty flat. Like, there were some cute moments where Alice's mom first meets this group of filmmakers. George, who is one of the three, like, has some good moments. The daughters are kind of cute. Like, I like the child characters who are like the smart beyond their years kind of deal, and the oldest daughter is very much like, she will hear something and immediately research it and Google it and know the ins and out of it, and it's just cute. She's the one who ends up writing the play about what's happening at their house, and she and George have this really cute dynamic. So again, we have like a good cast of side characters for this film. It's just that all of our main people and all of the love stories in it fall really flat to me. Everybody feels extremely one-dimensional. The movie itself is just like another one where it just could have been shorter, it could have been tighter. All of the dialogue just felt very stilted. I don't know, it was what it was. I think Meyers by this point, and just honestly, I'm like, you've been here, you've been successful, move on. I don't know. I wouldn't watch Home again. I don't think I would rate it as low as Something's Gotta Give, so it might be 2 stars. So overall, in my rankings, I would put The Parent Trap as number 1. Definitely would watch it again. The Intern, because I do think it has some redeeming moments. Father of the Bride, very mediocre movie. It's complicated. Home again. Something's Gotta Give. That would be my final ranking of the films that I watched. I did, for funsies, throw in a couple other of Meyers movies that I've seen. Obviously The Holiday, which I talked about before, which I think I would put in number 1. I don't know if this ranking would stand if I were to rewatch it now after having spent a ton of time with her films. I'm kind of tempted to rewatch it, and at the same time I'm like, no, I really like it. I don't want to spoil it for myself. We'll see. At this point, I've still held off, so it's going to keep its number 1 place. And then the other movie of hers that I've watched is What Women Want, which might slot in between Father of the Bride and It's Complicated. I remember enjoying this film. It was one of those where it like teetered into the realm of like, are you meaning for us to be upset with the blatant misogyny that's happening in this? Like, is that your goal here, is to be like, look how harmful misogyny is? Or are you trying to be like, look at this guy trying so hard, it's cute, it's endearing, or whatever? What Women Want felt like it played into that idea of women being from Venus and men being from Mars, which I just find like a very stupid concept. But that is the whole driving force of the movie, is just like, we're completely different species who don't understand each other. And you sit here and you're like, no, I think that's just because men are socially conditioned to not care about women, and women are socially conditioned to not be able to care about themselves. It was enjoyable, is what I remember of it. Not great, but I think probably just given how much I didn't like It's Complicated, Home Again and Something's Gotta Give, I would probably watch it. I'd be more willing to rewatch What Women Want than any of those three films. And with that, I have chatted far too long today. I'm gonna go finish my latte, probably read some books, and see you on the next video, where who knows what we're gonna be doing, but it will be fun. And it will probably involve books. Subscribe if you want to hang around for the next one, and I will catch y'all later.